Right, so education for the 21st century, how to make it appropriate, particularly for social and economic environments, which are impacting, to be honest, very badly on children's development at the moment. The reason I think I have a lot to say in this area is I've had 10 years now working with Fit to Learn, which promotes the understanding of a holistic child development. Also, I was very unfortunate to have my son blinded by my local hospital, and it took us about 18 months to reconnect his eyes to his brain and get his body working properly. From that, well, prior to that, also, I was as an educator doing a lot of experiential learning with students in things like the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme and Young Enterprise. I knew there was a big mismatch between what people were doing in classrooms and what they could really do the wider span. And some people, they were great in the classroom and hopeless in the real world. Then prior to that, I'd worked in refugee camps in Hong Kong with Vietnamese refugees, and I'd seen children who couldn't crawl because of the rats in the camps, and that impacted very badly on their development. Also, I'd seen children who didn't develop proper languages because they were unaccompanied minors who spoke bad Vietnamese, little Chinese, and a little English, but nothing properly. And that impacted their higher level development. I trained initially, believe it or not, as an auditor. And that actually is the most important thing. We all need to be auditors. And I would suggest we need to understand how the whole human works. The first thing you do when you are checking something and doing research is you should understand the system as a whole. And for social sciences like education, the leaders in this field of research are Duflo and Banerjee, who say if you don't understand the whole system, all other research is out of context. It doesn't make sense. And I would say it's a big problem. And we've seen that yesterday, with the debate around the phonics education, that, you know, it's just been plucked out of thin air without relevance to the whole development of learning to read. So we should be checking everything that's in place is the right stuff and nothing's there that shouldn't be happening. And keep reviewing that. It's an iterative process. And children particularly critically develop from 0 to 7. If that isn't in place, we need to go back and make sure it is. I spend a lot of time at the moment in secondary schools doing that. But I also work a lot with adults who find life too stressful because they're missing this first 7 years. So the research I suggest that I think is very useful for education is in fact evolutionary anthropology, and that the leaders in this field are people like Simon Hagan, who are saying they've looked at big data and they're getting, oh, diseases are falling, dramatic change, but mental health is exploding in modern life. Why? What is going on? And I realize this is an autistic sponsored debate, but in fact, I'd like to suggest to you that actually genetic causes are rare, and that there are other factors that we need to think about. So adverse situations like wars, like very traumatic domestic environments, can stunt a child's development. So we need to have a strategy to sort that out. Aging is a big issue, according to Simon Hagan, but we know from the long-term Glasgow studies that if a child's well developed at 11, that at 60, they're still well developed. That the worse your development is when you're young, the more rapid your decline is later. And then the important thing I want you to think about is the mismatch between our ancestral environment and our current environment. We are hunter-gatherers. We are not designed to be living in squalid, small, dark flats. We're not designed to sit at flat desks for hours. We are designed to be hunter-gatherers. Another useful anthropologist it's worth looking at is Henrik, who identifies certain features like the arches that rise, are very unique to humans, gives this tremendous springing run that develops between 4 and 7. Our very strong control of our spine, and that goes through developing till 7. Our ability to separate our head from our body and to have bilateral integration of motor skills, that is also unique to humans. If it's not in place, the eyes can't go across the midline. That impacts on things like reading. That is all developing by 7. So crawling, early motor skills is incredibly important for learning. When it's not in place, it affects even elite athlete performance. So you can see with Murray, his erratic performance is because unlike Mo and Farah, whose movement is forwards and backwards with the arms, Murray goes across his body. That's caused huge wear on his hips and means that he dropped out yesterday, I think, from his tennis performance. And that you get to see the same thing with Raducanu, and we see it with her jaw movement. I know she struggles to go across the midline. It doesn't matter how hard she works. We haven't got really good cognition. We haven't got the high level we need for the future. So we've had news of people getting big investment in robotics this morning in the Northeast, and then everyone goes, we haven't got skilled labour. We also have physiologically developed to be very pro-social. We can only survive on our cumulative cultural evolution. If you throw me out into the Arctic, I will die within hours. But if I'd grown up as an Inuit, I would learn the knowledge of previous generations. And that is quite important as it affected our whole physiology. It affects our cognitive development. And we need to build that in, that our physiology supports our use of tools, not rush to give children tools at 4, which unbalances everything, which is what we're doing, to be honest. But also, we need to learn the skills of being pro-social. It's so important because it's only when we work as a team we are really super successful. So very, very important to get those social skills in. So being in tune, reading body language, non-verbal communication, seeing patterns, trusting and sharing values, having really good memory, it is really important. So having excellent sound processing, having excellent visual processing, so you've got good auditory memories, you've got good visual memories, and it's not disrupted by poor development. So the data, as I said, postural control comes in at 7. Bilateral integration comes in at 7. If it doesn't come in, you can't understand a concept as a whole. Sound processing changes quite dramatically during the first 7 years. However, you must be aware, because of our modern lifestyles, 80% of children under 3 get inner ear infection, and they need an intervention to get their ears working properly. That is important for our pro-social skills, because the inner ear and the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems link into Porges' social engagement theories. Really important that we get the inner ear working properly. And you can see from our timeline of how children develop their sound processing, 7. And visual processing comes in slightly later because sound vision requires sound and motor skills to work properly. If you look at this later when you've got the PowerPoint and you hold a pencil up in between these 2 objects, you should be able to create an optical illusion where you see a third one in really good 3D. Most of you won't be able to. Your vision isn't sharp enough because we don't exercise the muscles around our eyes. We don't train our youngsters to see in the near range. We just assume it happens. And we know from data that's very well recognized that it doesn't really come in till 7, 8 years of age, that we can't track text till then. On top of that, we've got a lot of mouth breathers. We need to teach them to breathe through their nose. We've got very anxious lifestyles. We don't eat very good food, and we've got a lot of sleep problems. It's all biological. And that impacts on everyone's basic learning, their basic development, and their basic mental health. So accompanying this exciting lecture, I'd sent over to Felicia a list of my videos showing people how they can go step by step through to support good human development. If you've got questions, obviously, chase me down by email, and I'm happy to support anyone. I hope I haven't gone over the 12 minutes.